Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Coffee with Evan. Today I've got my school fuel cup with me, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But before I do, I'm making my first announcement on Coffee with Evan. In fact, I've got two announcements for you guys. First of all, I'm taking this to show, or whatever you want to call it, this mini series to only twice a month. And I'm still trying to get the interview series done, which hopefully by April I've got that up and running. That's only once a month. We've got Behind the Queens every time we record. So if we record every week in a month, there's a Behind the Queens. And then we'll have the Coffee with Evan every other week or so. At least twice a month it'll be published. How I get around to doing that, I'll have to figure that out. Now that I'm back at work and I'm busier than ever, especially in the community, which I love, it's just, I want to make sure that we're still producing content for you guys and we're doing it in the time that we say we are. I've been a little slow on the videos and I don't think that's fair. So I'm trying to find a schedule that works for everybody. But I like doing this because I like encouraging and inspiring people as they're trying to find their way on their journey to healing, whether that's healing from rejection or religious abuse from family, whether that's healing from how you felt when you came out, whether that's healing from maybe addiction or something more. I want to help you and encourage you and also give you space to grieve and honor that grief. And one other thing, this is a sneak peek only for the Patreons. We've talked about the postcards that we're sending out, so you should be receiving these soon. These were, well, we believe these were done by a queer artist. We could not find the artist's information, but we loved it. This is from the first Pride. It's a very famous picture of Marsha and Sylvia marching in front of the first Pride. If you remember those episodes, they weren't allowed to march, so they ran to the front of the parade and marched in front of everyone, and it's awesome. So anyways, and these are going to have a personalized note on the back of them for each Patreon to say thank you for the way that you supported the podcast. So let's talk about school fuel. I chose this cup. This is, my wife is a middle school teacher. She teaches a medically fragile classroom. She's a special needs classroom. And she gets a lot of these kits that have a coffee cup and a wine glass in them, which are really cute. They're good ideas for teachers. And I don't drink, so, she takes the wine glass and I take the coffee cup. And I chose this one because I wanted to talk about dealing with our insecurities today. And my biggest insecurity outside of, trauma-based insecurities, my biggest one is my education. I'm really, really insecure about my education. I only attended a real school for about 2 years of my life, and that was in kindergarten and half of first grade. We attended a large Christian school. I attended a large Christian school down in South Carolina because my family was from South Carolina. And my parents had gone to Indiana to study in the Colt College, and then they had gone back to South Carolina to start their own church. And my mom was trying to raise my little brother and sister who were toddlers, and so they didn't want to put me in a school, but they did. It was a Christian school, but it didn't align with their values, and they were very, very strict about that. My mom homeschooled me for the next year, but that year is when my dad got really sick again. His leukemia came back. He had been in remission. His leukemia came back. And then he died in February of that year. So, I remember the homeschooling some, but again, this was my mother trying to homeschool me in our church with her husband dying. And so then my mom decided to leave her family. She always has chosen the Colt over her family. So they had been living in South where all of their family, that's where she grew up her entire life. That's where my father grew up his entire life. But the Colt leader said, why don't you come out back up to Indiana, Janice? And so she did. And so then he gave her a job teaching in their Christian school, which was about the only place that my mom could use her degree. She had gotten a degree from the Colt College, so she could only use it. It's also a way that they kind of keep people in the IFB movement because they push you to go to these colleges, and the only places that honor the degrees or diplomas from these colleges are other IFB churches. And so you kind of feel trapped in there. And a lot of places literally a lot of people talk about how they literally stayed in the movement a lot longer because they were like, I don't have any real life skills and I don't have anywhere to go. So from 3rd grade to 12th, I went to a school that was run by the church Colt. And then I went to a college for 4 years that was run by the church cult. And they, I mean, there were basic subjects they taught, like English and math, that I feel like, I mean, it's kind of hard to be biased in English and math. I mean, we had, when we would do like a word problem, it would be religiously based. Like, you know, you might have a word problem that says, you know, Joey, if Joey boards a train in Philadelphia and he's traveling to Pittsburgh and the train takes so long, you know, you'd like those kind of word problems. Instead, we'd be like, Billy's on his way to Sunday school. If he gets on the bus here, what time will he arrive? And the bus is traveling this fast. What time will he arrive at Sunday school? You know, so they just like reworded things like that. But for the most part, English and math were pretty standard. It wasn't when you got into the other subjects that it started to get crazy. History was very, very biased. I think that's why I love history, I always have, but I think that's also why I'm driven with a passion for history, because I know what happens when people teach a very biased history. It really encourages this nationalist, biased perspective of history, and you truly think that you're in the right because you think, well, history tells me that white people have always been superior, and the fact that they're not teaching you the history of Native people and Asian people and Black and Latino and Spanish and Hispanic, like they're not teaching you other people's history. That's why you believe that your history is correct. So, and then science, that was a joke. I'm trying to think of what after that, their subjects were very them-based. Like we had a Bible class. I had a Bible class every single day of my life from 7th grade until I graduated. We went to chapel 3 times a week. And then when I was in college, we went to chapel every day. So we would have you would wake up, you'd go to your college classes, and then at noon you would have to go to a preaching service before you were allowed to leave, and you were required to go to that. They had a lot of these subjects that were really tailored to keeping women submissive, keep making men very toxic. You could take a 4-year marriage and motherhood course at our college. Every woman was required to take so many like Christian wife and Christian motherhood courses, regardless of what your study was, which there were only 3 courses that they offered to women. There was marriage and motherhood. There was the teaching, which again, that degree only would apply to IFB schools. And then there was a 2-year secretarial course, which is basically, they were like, this is what a woman can do in life. You can always and you couldn't be an administrator in a school. You could only be a teacher in a school. So it wasn't until I got out and left, and I loved school. I really did. I loved it. But it wasn't until I got out and I left that I realized how much I didn't know. I didn't realize how awful my education had been. And I was very embarrassed. And I still struggle with it, because then when I got out and I left, and then I was thrown into abject poverty, and I was homeless for a while, and then I was living in, you know, one of the worst neighborhoods in this state, in the entire area. And I was just trying to get by, like a lot of people, you know, just trying to survive. So going back to school was not on my mind. And then I fell deep into my addiction. And so years passed. And by the time I really had started to put my life together again, the idea of going back to school was daunting in a different way. And that was that I was humiliated because I didn't know what people were talking about. I went to take a placement test at a community college thinking, well, I'll go, and I've had a lot of education, 4 years of college and everything. And I just like tanked on the community class, and on the placement test, I tanked on it, and I was just like, and then I ran away. There's this fever in me that wants to be educated, and I think that's also why I read so much. I read a lot. As of, this year, I track how many books I read each year. I've read 15 books so far this year. I've got 2 more that I'm working on by the end of this week. I'll be done with those. Like, I read constantly. I try to read about 2 books a week. I take these free online courses. I do all these things because I want to feed this knowledge, and but also because I feel insecure. And there's 2 parts to that. The first part is like, I need to love myself and accept who I am and where I'm at. And I can't change the past, and this is who I am. And the second thing, I need to learn to play to my strengths. I am a context learner. I'm a person who can go out and I can learn things for myself. And so I can sit in self-pity that I didn't have the education that I wanted, or I can find other ways to educate myself. There's also the option of going back to school. For me right now, though, I'm not taking that. I'm finding other ways, and I'm embracing the strengths that I have. And the thing about our insecurities is a lot of times it causes us to look past the strengths that we do have, or it causes us to look at the strengths that we have and think that they're inferior. A lot of people tell me, you know, you know more about a certain subject than I do, and the reason is that you were more driven. Like, maybe I went to school for this, but I went to school because my parents wanted me to, or because I needed to pick a education. I needed to pick a field of study, and so I chose this. My drive, because of my insecurities, allows me to be really well versed in a lot of subjects. But I also contend with the fact that if I go somewhere and they ask for my credentials, I don't really have any. But I'm creating them. I'm creating them one little piece at a time. I can say now that, you know, I've been hosting a queer history podcast for almost 2 years. I can say now that I am a LGBTQ advocate, a paid LGBTQ advocate for the community. I've taken some free online courses and got certificates for them. A lot of communities, especially if you live near a big city, will they'll offer free courses and free training for people because they're trying to reinvest into their economy. You know, if you train more people, these people can take more skilled jobs, and it helps your economy as a whole. And so you got to look for them. You really do, but your library usually has those resources posted, and you could take advantage of those. So I took advantage of a free, it was called a first aid mental health class, but it gave me a certification that I could say, you know, I've had some training in mental health. There are little things. It's not as nice as a full-blown bachelor's or, you know, master's degree in anything, but it's something that I can show that I worked for, and I know that I worked hard for these things. So this has gone longer than I normally do, and I probably won't cut a lot of it out, but I just want to encourage you, look at your insecurities and look past the fear and the shame, and look at what it really is, and use your strengths to your advantage. Don't focus on the weaknesses. Focus on your strengths. If you continue to focus on your strengths, you're going to make your weaknesses stronger. And stay in school, kids.